Hi friends, first of all, you are all awesome and thank you so much for all of the comments and encouragement you've been giving me on my recent videos. It really means a lot to me. So in this video, we're going to be looking at the Power Drag and Drop application we've been building, but this time with a little bit of a twist. So on the screen right now, you can see a lot of apps like Word and Outlook that all have one thing in common. A lot of effort goes into this area, and yet you probably don't notice it at all, even though you're likely to be using it quite regularly. And it's amazing that it doesn't get talked about very much in Power Apps. Can you guess what it is? Well, the good news is that it's very easy to do in Power Apps if you follow the principles I'm going to show you. And it'll also give you an amazing sense of satisfaction and also make a firm foundation for all of your apps in terms of user experience and user adoption. The topic, of course, is keyboard accessibility and shortcuts. You may even have paused this video using the spacebar. See, I told you. So let's take a look at how we can make the touch and pointer-centric app that we've been building usable using just the keyboard. And also, for bonus points, make it accessible using a screen reader. Okay, so this is where we left off. We just run this. We've got our drag and drop scheduling board, and I can move items onto our board, I can move them around, I can move people up and down, and the tasks move with them. I can have more than one task in each of these items here. Previously we put a limit on one task per day, but I've just removed that. What we're going to do firstly is add in the ability to edit a task manually. If I come into the layout here, what I've done is I've just had to rejig it slightly. So I've got the root as we had before, but now what I've got is this container here, which is the layout container, which I've added in. And this has got where we had before, we had the calendar layout, which is a stack panel, but then we've added in this additional stack here for the editing pane inside this vertical stack panel here, and then set visibility to true. You can now see we've got this edit task here. Now, none of these buttons do anything, nor do these text boxes do anything either. But what we're going to do is when we select an item, edit it directly here. One of the key things about navigating around your app and making it efficient is being able to tab. And this also tallies in with screen readers and accessibility as well. But if we look at this first item here and I tab down, you'll notice that there's some kind of weird things going on here. It's tabbing in a very odd order. I go from the name to assign to, then onto the close icon, and then to the close button. And the reason being is that Power Apps by default, this is Power Apps, not the Canvas apps, not custom pages, manages tab orders in a bit of a strange way. But if we go into settings, we've got a special setting that is called, we go down here, simplified tab index. Okay, so I can turn simplified tab index off or on. If we go into this inspector, okay, and what this allows us to do is to just inspect the elements. I'm going to run this app and inspect these elements here. So if you remember that the due date was kind of not being tabbed in the right order. And the reason is, if we look at this due date, you'll see that we have got tab index, there it is, a tab index of 0. There's the 0. And that's the standard, okay? That's what's normally accepted as the correct behavior. What Canvas apps does, and this is a legacy thing which is being removed. As I said, in custom pages, it's no longer like this by default, but there's still this legacy behavior in Canvas apps. If I select this assign to, what you'll notice is that we've got a tab index of 247. And that's because the tab index is being set based on the position on the screen. There's a docs article that kind of explains how it does this and how it works out the tab index. But really what we want to do is make sure that all of the controls have a tab index of 0. Now, as long as Power Apps is managing the tab indexes itself across the board, that's fine. But the problem happens is when you start to combine custom controls like the drag and drop control, or indeed this due date time picker, which I copied from a custom page to get that kind of fluent layout, which doesn't have that legacy tab order behavior. So let's go and change it. So we go into app and coming features and we'll turn on simplified tab index and now run that and then inspect. We should see that this has now got a tab index of 0. You'll see that there you go, there's a tab index 0. So what that means is now I can tab around. If we tab, there we go, I can move up until the cancel and down there and back again, etc., and back into the other item. So the tab index is now a lot more logical. And with the drag and drop component, if I select this, we've got a property on here called allow focus. And what I've done is I've set this allow focus to be an expression to say only allow focus on the drag and drop zone in each of these calendar days if there is more than one item. And you'll see why this is later on. But what this means is for any item where there is just one item, we can't actually take focus on the day item. It's just going to be selecting the individual item inside that day. And so if we go back to that tab, you'll see as I'm tabbing around there, you can see I'm only selecting the days where there is more than one item. So what we want to be able to do firstly is be able to select an item by having an icon, like an edit icon inside these tasks, and then dynamically show and hide this edit pane, and then make sure that we're handling the focus correctly. Because when we select and edit, we want to then move focus over onto the panel over here so that we can start to edit the task. Close the panel because we may not want to open it. So of course, in order to have an edit icon, we need an icon in the first place, and we're going to use SVG icons, and there's loads of places you can get SVG, but it kind of looks like this. It's not like HTML style tags where you've got a path. And so what you want to do is go and grab the SVG and come over to some sort of encoder tool. Now I'm using this online tools URL encode, and what we want to do is we want to URL encode it, so it kind of turns it into this escaped set of characters here so that we can pop it into some inline CSS and go back to the design mode, and we come into our template. If you remember, we've been editing the item template and expand that out. I made a little bit of a change there. Rather than before we were showing an asterisk, now we're showing it in bold to indicate if it's been edited or not. I've also added in some slightly different styling here. So for example, I've made it so that it will only show 2 lines before showing some ellipses to show the overflow. So it just doesn't end up like growing to a really high size when you've got a long description. Alongside the name, what we want to do is we also want to put this edit button in here. And what this is, got some inline style, which is quite straightforward when you break it down. And the key part here is it's got that background image. And that background image is this URL format, which is we've pasted in that URL encoded SVG. But once you've got your template working, the critical part here is this class action. Okay, so by setting the class with an action dash prefix, what it's telling the drag and drop component is that this button isn't something that should just allow you to drag and drop the item. It should be something that you can click. And then when you have a button or any element, it could be an anchor tag that's clickable with a class of action dash, it will then raise the on action event, and the action will be the name that comes after the action element. So in this case, it's going to be the action is going to be open. So if we run this, we should now see that we've got, there's our little icons. And you can see if I click on it, it doesn't allow me to drag. I can drag this item, but I can't drag that because it's got this action defined on it. If we come into the master drop zone, and this is really important that the event, this on action event is going to be only called on the master drop zone, which is our list of unassigned tasks. I can put in like a, notify on action like that and say self.action name like that. And also I've got self.action ID. And that means that we can now not only determine which action has been called, we can also determine which item that action has been called on. You can see there we've got the GUID. So if you've got 2 items there, the GUID's going to be different. So suddenly now we've got the ability to get the unique ID that we specified, our item ID for our drag and drop component, and we can use that to define which item is going to be edited. So as before, we're going to go and create a new function in our container here. So I'm going to call this, I'm going to say function on action. And inside this, the select, I'm going to put this little bit of code here. And so what we're doing is we are setting some context variables. So we're saying this is the selected task, and we're looking up in the tasks where the action ID matches the project task. Okay, so there's the project task, and we're converting the action ID into a GUID. And we're also going to set another context variable called edit task focus, and we'll see how that works in a minute. But ultimately what we want to make sure is that when we edit the item, we also set focus on the edit panel so that we can then use our tab and tab around on it. In addition to that, we also need to make sure that we are going to reset all of the different edit fields. So we've got the task name, the task assigned to, task date. So you make sure that they take on the new values that are going to come from our selected task. So this function on action, we want to call inside the on action event. So rather than doing this notify, I'm just going to say select function on action like that. Now in the visibility expression of our panel here, which is going to be the edit task panel, rather than just being true or false, we're going to make this dynamic. So we're going to say, so is a blank like that, and then say context selected task. And we say it's only going to be visible if it's not blank. Okay, because so by default, you know, when we start up, there's not going to be any item. And so if we now select on one of these items, there it shows us the panel on the right hand side. So far so good, but none of the values are populated. And the reason being obviously is we haven't set these values. So I'm just going to go and set these. So select task, and that will be for the name. And then on the assigned to, what we want to do is we want to say that the items of the people picker effectively is the people like that. And we want to make sure that the fields, we'll use full name as the fields, which is good. And we want to say, well, the default selected item is selected task like that, and then assigned to. Okay, and then in the date time picker, in a very similar way, we'll say that the value of this is the selected task, and then it's the due date like that. So immediately you can see here we've got our data being populated. So if I edit these items here, you can see here it's populating on the right all of the values. So far so good. Now what we'll next need to do is we need to make sure that when we update those values, it will update the task, but also when we click the close button up here or the close button down here, it will also close this pane. So we'll go and create another function called close edit pane. So I'll go and add in a new button, which will act as a function. And I call this close edit pane like that. And the on select in here is going to be just very simply blanking out the selected task there. But also we want to remember which task was previously selected. And you'll see in a minute what we're going to do is use that to make sure that we can highlight the previously selected task when we set focus back on the drag and drop items. So obviously we'll need to call that from our close button. So select function close edit pane like that. And then we'll call that also from our little close button on the top there. If we run that now, we should just be able to close that. Awesome. And open that and use that. Another function called update task. So we add in this button there and say function update task. And let's add this bit of code. Now, this bit of code is firstly using a with statement. And if you remember, a with statement kind of creates a local variable just for this expression. And we're saying this unassigned is a Boolean to say, is the selected blank or is the date blank? So we're effectively saying that if you blank out either the selected or the date, we are effectively unassigning this task. And we will patch this. So we're going to patch the col tasks. So we want to look up which record we want to patch. And we're going to use the primary key, the project task, to find that item. We'll specify the name based on the text field and then the assigned to and the due date and the zone. What we want to do is we want to decide on if it's blank or not based on this unassigned flag at the top here. But also, if you remember before, the zone is defined based on if it's unassigned, it'll appear in the unassigned area. But if it's not unassigned, then the zone is a combination of both the date and also the person ID with this pipe in between. And so by setting this dynamically, it will then appear in the correct place. And we're just going to set a little edited flag like we did before so that we can make sure that it's going to appear edited but in bold. And so this functionality is very similar to when we were dropping items onto our board. It's effectively the same code. And so we want to call that from, so if we run that like that, we can now say, okay, on change of any of these items, we're going to call that update task routine. So it will go and pick up the right value. So let's set that in there and check how that works. So here is this project Eagle and Child there, and we've got it selected here. So let's just change this to be Maria Campbell. So there you go. It's now moved across to Maria Campbell's row, and it's in bold now. And also I can change the date as well, so move it across. Let's move it onto the 23rd. There we go. You can see it's moved into that item there. So if we take this one here and I move that to be the 19th, that's not even on my board. So let's move it to the 23rd and then move it to the 24th. You can see it's moving around. And then if I remove this, so let's just delete the item and move it there. You can see it's disappeared because it's popped it back into the unassigned tasks. But notice the due date here is still assigned, is still set, because of course is that we haven't cleared the previous value. The previous value is still being remembered, and it's because we need to make sure that we've reset that value. And a very easy way of doing that is coming in back into that function area and go to the update task statement there. This patch here will return the new value effectively. So what we can do is we can set that selected item. So if we say update context and we say context selected task, we can set this selected task to be the output of this update, in which will have the new values. And of course, what that will mean is it will force those text boxes to refresh when we've changed it. So let's select this one here, Project Eagle and Child, and let's remove Maria Campbell, which will effectively unassign it. And I'll move back, there we go, and it's removed the due date because we've updated the selected task. So if you remember before on our close edit pane, we set the previous selected task, okay? And the reason being is that if I come into my day drag and drop zone here, there is a input event property. So you can see there, input event. And what this does is this defines the ability to tell our component that we want to do something. In this case, we want to set the focus on a particular item. And the reason being is when we close our pane, we want the focus to go back to the previous item that we had edited. And so what we're saying here is that if the zone of the previously edited item is the same as the zone of this item, then set the focus item to be the previous selected task. The format for this is a string, and what you do is you have to add a comma separated string. So focus item is the first comma, then the ID of the item you want to select. And then this is a really important part on the end here. We have to add in a little random element, and that is to trigger the fact that this event is going to be called. And so if we go in edit a task here and we just close that to set it to be edited. So if I go back there and just tab away from our date time picker and press return, that edit is called, and if you notice that it's now highlighted the icon that I just came from. So it allows me now to carry on tabbing around from the previous item that I had selected. So if I go do that again, close, you can see here we're back into the item, so we're just editing. But what we do want to do is when we open up an item, we also want to tab to fields that allows us to edit the item, because at the moment I'm still focused on the item that I've just selected, which isn't really much use from a keyboard accessibility perspective. So if we go to the event that gets called when it's on action, if you remember, we were setting this edit task focus to an event with the random seed. And that's because the Creator Kit icon component has the same pattern. If we go to the Creator Kit icon, which we input as the little cross button at the top here, it's got a input event. So if I set that to edit task focus here, And now if we run this, if I click on edit for this item here, you notice now that our focus has been set to be the edit icon. What I can do now is I can now tab into the various different items and close that. It takes me back to where it came from. If I press return, I can move around and tab and edit the date. So it gives us that ability to easily use the keyboard to move around. Obviously, I want to do the same for the unassigned tasks. So if I come into the item template for the unassigned task, I can add in the same button, doing exactly the same thing. It's just simply calling the action open, and we are going to just see how that works. So if we now select that open, the focus has been set on the icon. I can tab around and I can say, let's just set this to be assigned to Nancy Anderson, and let's give it a date, and then close, and then tab away and close. You can see we've edited that and we're focused on the item that I came from. But if I go and select an unassigned task and just simply tab and close, it should give me set my focus on that button, which it hasn't. And I think that's because we haven't taken the same strategy. If you remember before, we set the input event on our drop zone here. So if we go to the input event for our drop zone input, and let's go and take this functionality there and take it here and look for the input event. So what we want to do there is set that same functionality, except for rather than this item zone, of course, for unassigned items, the zone is unassigned. So we're going to set focus to the particular drop zone and set focus on a particular item only if it's unassigned. So let's try that again, and edit an item here, tab over, close, and there we go. We've now got the focus back on the items in the unassigned. So it gives us, like, you know, the ability to tab around and really edit the items and move back and forth. But let's say that we wanted to easily move back and forwards from the unassigned tasks to the calendar assigned tasks. At the moment, we have to use Shift tab and tab to kind of move back and forth between them. Let's say we wanted to assign some hotkeys. So for the staff, maybe we wanted to add the hotkey T, and for the unassigned task, we wanted to have the hotkey U. Well, in the Creator Kit, there's actually a keyboard shortcut component. So if I say insert and say get more components, I can come over to code components and search for keyboard. There we go, keyboard shortcuts, and import that. And I'm going to go and add that into our set of functions down here. So let's just go and say add the keyboard shortcuts component, and let's just remove the one. It has got a property here. There's two important properties. The first is the key config, which allows me to define which I want to respond to. And then the second one is the actual on key, which is the value of the key that's going to be pressed when that event is raised. I'm going to give it a config here. Let's pop that in here, telling the component that we want to respond to Alt U, Alt S, Alt T. You know, you could put any different shortcuts. You could use the modifier control, you could Control Shift, Control Alt, but I'm going to use Alt because that's the most common way of interacting with keyboard shortcuts. But also we wanted to actually have some sort of indicator on the headers here that there is a keyboard shortcut there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace that with an HTML component. So I'm going to go into the header here and add in HTML text. And I'm going to put one in for the unassigned tasks and one for the start. So I've put just a little bit of HTML. So all I'm saying is that the T will be underlined to indicate that it's a shortcut. And I'm going to do the same for the unassigned tasks. The U is unassigned. And I can remove the old one and I can replace it with this one. So let's just move it back. Let's give it a height of 32. There we go. We've got the underline on the T and underline on the U. If we go to our keyboard shortcuts component, it's got an on-change event here. So in this on-change event will get raised when a keyboard shortcut is pressed. So I'll put this code in like this. And what we're doing here is we're just doing a switch statement on the on-key property, which is which key has been pressed. And if it's Alt U, I'm going to update this task event context to be set focus. If it's Alt T, then I'm going to have this calendar event. Alt S, I'm going to set focus on the save icon, and I'm actually also going to select the save. So Alt S will actually then invoke the save action. So let's just wire these up. So the task event, I want to set focus on these unassigned tasks like this. So what I can do at the moment, if you remember before, I'm setting focus on a particular item. Okay. Well, actually, if an item is not selected, if our previous task zone is not unassigned, we just want to set it to be the task event. And in the same way, we go to our day slot event and we add the item on the end so that we know that when this context variable is going to change, it will actually register this event. We need to make sure that they are focusable. Okay, so there is a allow focus. So we need to make sure we allow focus on the unassigned tasks here. So if I run this, I need to be set in the focus so that I'm in sort of keyboard navigation mode, and I say Alt U, you can see there we go. It's now set my focus on the items down here. And if I say Alt T, it will then move my focus back to the calendar event. So it kind of allows me to toggle. I can move around in here and I just say Alt U, and it's going to move me into the items. Now, if we're going to make this application accessible, we also need to think about screen readers, and that is where you have a set of keyboard navigation, or you could use any other device for someone who can't use a keyboard or can't use a mouse or a touch device, and they maybe not be able to see your application. They may be partially sighted or blind. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure we've got a prompt and a screen reader prompt in here to describe the items that you're moving around between. If we look at this item here that we're moving on to, what we want to do is we want to actually be able to describe this and actually have a way of saying, what is this we've just set focus on as we're tabbing around, or we're using a screen reader accessible key. And here we're using this ARIA label attribute, which gives you the ability to describe what's inside of this if it's somehow different from the actual contents that is shown. Now, in our case, of course, I need to go and fix the template there. I've just done something to it. Let me just go and check that. Okay, yeah, I need to just close that off there. And so I start another attribute. And so, right, so we go there. Now, if you think about it from an accessibility perspective, we know if we can see this screen, we know that we are in the column for Saturday 21st. We also know we're in the row of Jim Glynn here. But if we're moving around using tab and we can't see this data, or we may be too small, or we just can't see the screen at all, then that needs to fully describe what we are highlighted on. And that's what we're doing with that template here. We are describing the row and the column information by saying this is the task name and it's assigned to this particular person and it's due on a particular date. Equally, when we are doing the same in the unassigned tasks, we want to do something similar, but we want to say this is like an unassigned task. ARIA label is saying unassigned. When we've got a button, we also want to give this a description of the button, because remember we've only got the icon, the little edit icon. So we want to give this a label to say, well, you know, if you can't see that icon, then it will describe what it is. The thing is that a lot of these components inside Power Apps actually have ARIA labels. So if you come and look at for accessible label, you can see, there we go. We've got the label that the gallery is saying, this is the overall gallery is the calendar, and I've labeled each of the items in that as a person row. And again, those are prompts that will be outputted into the ARIA labels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable the screen reader and I'm going to navigate around so you can hear what that sounds like.
Save edited tasks. List tasks. Refresh tasks. Tasks, January 21st, 2023. Contains 2 items. Task meeting with Megan. Assigned to Jim Glynn. Sample. Due on January 21st, 2023. Task record product demo. Assigned to Jim Glynn. Sample. Due on January 21st, 2023. Button. Scan off. Task name. Edit. Record product demo. Task assigned to Jim Glynn. Sample. Combo edit.
So now you'll notice that when we tabbed into the open, when we opened the item, when we set focus on this cross on the close, it didn't actually give us a prompt. It just said this is a button. So we want to look for the accessibility label and set this to something that actually makes sense. So what we'll do is we'll set this to say it's going to announce that we are editing a task and give it the name, and then say that this is a closed task button. And one of the rules of setting accessibility labels is you shouldn't ever give an indicator of to what it is, a button and an option set or a drop down or anything like that. That should come from the very nature of the control that it is. I'll switch now to the screen reader and you can hear what that sounds like.
Task meeting with Megan. Editing task meeting with Megan. Close task button.
We've now got a much richer experience from the labels that are being announced. So there we have it. And the great thing about following these principles is not only will it make your apps more accessible, it will probably also make your apps easier to use overall. So thanks for watching, and if you've not already, please subscribe to my channel, and until next time, have a great day. Cheers.